Hi again. Thanks, John. If you're just tuning in, I'm Helen Ewing. I'm the co-president of the Fuqua Tech Club, and I'm really excited to moderate this panel on disruption in big tech. So we have several panelists today from Dell, from Cisco, from IBM, and from Facebook. So I'm going to do some quick introductions of each of them. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions and then leave some time at the end. So again, if you have questions as they're speaking, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A and I'll get to them at the end. Okay, so starting with Sarah Burkhart. Sarah is the Director of Experiences in the Client Product Group at Dell. Her team delivers innovative solutions that improve experiences with Dell PCs in a market where people's expectations about the role of PCs is rapidly evolving. Before Dell, she worked in a variety of small tech businesses, planning and launching product and channel programs. She's a native Texan. She and her family of 5, including 3 young boys, stay busy exploring Central Texas. Thanks, Sarah, for being with us. Travers O'Leary is also here from Cisco. And Travers is a product manager at Cisco, where he works on their wireless team. He's responsible for strategizing the future of their Wi-Fi and IoT portfolios. And before Cisco, Travers worked at Deloitte Consulting in their smart city practice, focused on mobility solutions. Travers has an MBA from Cornell and an undergraduate degree in public policy from the University of Virginia. Nice to have you, Travers. Chidi Eric is a client partner at Facebook. He is focused on helping digitally native companies grow and reach their customers in new and innovative ways. He works primarily with disruptors, which are early stage, high growth, direct-to-consumer brands across e-commerce and health and beauty. Before joining Facebook, Chidi spent 8 years in investment banking. During his time at Fuqua, he was Finance Club president and also heavily involved with Media and Entertainment Club. Chidi graduated from Fuqua daytime class of 2012, and he currently sits on both the Fuqua alumni and Duke SoCal boards. Really great to have you, Chidi. Last but not least, Kevin Powell is Director of IBM Services, focused on managed infrastructure as a service. Kevin oversees IBM Services infrastructure business across public to private clouds, including cloud networking. Overall, Kevin spent the last 20 plus years in the IT industry in consulting, marketing, strategy, and product management executive roles. Kevin graduated from Fuqua daytime class of 2007. So thank you again for being with us today. I'm going to start with a question for all of you. So if you could just speak to what is one disruption in tech or within your industry that you're focused on right now, and what is your company doing to take advantage of it or to drive disruption there? So I'll start with Sarah, if she's on.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. It's hard to pick one. So first of all, thank you for having me. I think the thing that's probably the most top of mind and the most resonant for all of you on this panel is just the amount of acceleration going on in adoption curves across a bunch of different vectors in technology. So we had, in pre-times, right, pre-COVID, we had roadmaps associated with various different aspects of our technology products and offerings. And as we've seen our customers sort of navigate their work from home, and then as they're planning their return to site, that we've had, to partner with them to help them really accelerate what their needs were on those roadmaps. And so that's caused us to accelerate our own roadmaps as well in response to their needs. So I think you have to be flexible and agile and respond to those market dynamics, because you don't necessarily always get to control the market dynamics. And so it's important to have those built-in feedback loops from your customers. I think that's something that has been really helpful for us. We have a very strong customer feedback loop process in place.
Thanks, Sarah. Travers, do you want to speak to the same question? Oh, you're on mute.
Cool, I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. In terms of, different disruptions that we've had to focus on at Cisco, I think that, COVID-19 has been top of mind for us. It's fundamentally changed the way that we work, shop at retailers, eat out at restaurants, and interact with each other. And given that my team's focused on deploying wireless products, developing a coherent response solutions to COVID is pretty important to our success. Traditionally, we've deployed wireless grade and networking grade products in the office environment. So we've really had to think through what that means for the remote worker and how we can create seamless connectivity for users who don't traditionally work at home and have been moved to more remote working as that's become more common. And so we've also had to focus on solutions that could help us return to work faster. So in terms of the solutions that help enable remote work, we offer different secure access products like VPN, helping defend users from different threats, and just creating a more seamless integration between the home networking environment and the office environment. And what I'm currently working on with my team is looking at more, I would say, low-end access points that could be deployed in the home, but are still enterprise-wide. So this has been, including a lot of research on consumer-type devices like mesh, making these experiences more friendly. And so it's been, a pretty exciting time to be a new product manager at Cisco. And then second, we're focused on deploying solutions that can help employees return to work faster. So we have a product called DNA Spaces, which is a cloud-specific product that actually can track the number of, client devices in a given office building. So it's a smart building technology. And so this could help, be deployed for to identify hotspots in offices where people are congregating and maybe not social distancing, to really inform different public health measures and decrease the spread of COVID, and just, create a more healthy work environment.
Thank you. That's awesome. I can definitely attest to Cisco's response to that, since I was working on that this summer. Was really impressed with how quickly they were able to pivot to meet those new consumer needs. Judy, I wanted to hop over to you to answer that same question.
Thanks, Helen. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
So I think more than ever, consumers are actually purchasing from companies that they actually believe in. So there's more of like a social element that's changing the marketplace. I know at Facebook, we're adopting to how consumers are now connecting with each other, right, on the commerce side. We have new products like the portal, and we have new AR and VR products and things of that nature. We're even taking a different approach to addressing things like hate speech, misinformation. Obviously, this is important to the individuals we have on the platform, and something that we've always taken seriously, but we've definitely been focusing on that as of late with everything going on right now with the pandemic, racial equality and misinformation and the elections and all of those really important topics.
Awesome, absolutely. Kevin, do you want to respond to the question too?
Sure, Helen. And first, thanks for having me here like everyone else. Appreciate the opportunity. And like David, I missed the opportunity to do the short drive up to see the old campus and see how it's changed over time. Obviously, great discussion in tech. Obviously, disruptions are constant, and that's the beauty of technology. I think all my peers would say also, whether it's AI, whether it's 5G, there's constant disruption. One in particular I was going to bring up for this forum, more of a business disruption, I think is affecting all those technologies, is really the shift to as a service, which I've found very interesting. I've been in the hardware side, software side, built the technologies, but we're seeing now it's not just the technology, but almost to how Bryce talked about the delivery, how are customers consuming that? And we've seen a lot of transformation in the industry now where, whether it's the thin clients David was talking about, whether it's storage, whether it's infrastructure, platforms, applications are now being done as a service, right? So whether it's software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, that's really changing the landscape, right? And customers still want that great technology. They still want that innovation, but now they're no longer doing a capital purchase. They're no longer buying an enterprise license and subscript. They're shifting to the Uber model, right? That really disrupted transportation, right? I want to pay for what I use, when I use it, get just what I need, walk away at any time, and really get that technology benefit, but deliver it to me in a whole new fashion, which to me, when I started after Fuqua at IBM, I was working in distribution models and, with resellers and, you're putting software on CDs, and that's all really shifted now. And particularly Gartner's called out that the infrastructure service market alone is 73 billion and growing 27%, right? So all the technologies from all the great companies here, we're actually partnering with a lot of those and bringing them forward to the market. It says, okay, how do I now do that as a service, right? In a different consumption model for customers. So it's a very different business model around all these great technologies.
Great, thank you. So you spoke to many different elements of change that are going on right now that are impacting the market. And I'm curious, you're all part of really large tech companies, some of them quite well established for years. When responding to these changes that are happening so rapidly, what are some of the challenges that you face within your companies in driving change and that responsiveness? If anyone wants to start, you can jump in. Kevin,
Sure,
you're ready.
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things in IBM, obviously we've been around maybe the longest, many of these companies, constant evolution and change, right? And it was in a presentation I saw 10 years ago about, go to your parents, go to your grandparents, what do they think IBM even does? Most of them think we're doing laptops or computers. Constant reinvention. And even one of the biggest advice I give MBA students coming out of school, don't worry about what division you go into or what department. It will be different. If you're going to be here 5 years, 10 years, it will change. When I joined IBM from Fuqua, the cloud didn't exist yet. All these AI didn't exist yet. So it will change. So it's that constant reinvention, I think is key. And then I think aligns to many Fuquans, but being a person who can quickly learn, adapt, and be flexible so that you can keep moving with the technology. It's exciting, but it is fast-paced and changes rapidly.
I'd like to add on to that. Thanks, Kevin. I'd like to add on to that in order to drive change in large organizations, there's the business implications of the change that you want to drive, and that's necessary. And each person working in their respective areas needs to be sort of aware of changing market dynamics and bring their own proposals to decision makers to facilitate those changes. But the other thing that often doesn't get emphasized enough and plays a huge role in the success of those pivots is the organizational change aspects. And, being really transparent around why we need to pivot at a certain time and preparing enough information to share with the various stakeholders to get buy-in, because you certainly have more stakeholders in a large organization that you have to sort of coordinate and orchestrate to achieve an intended result. And that means often a lot more socialization of what the change needs to be. So never underestimate the power of relationship building, because that can certainly help in the moments where you are at a critical juncture, and then you do need to get people within various organizations aligned to your vision. And if you don't have those relationships to begin with, it's not impossible. It just makes it a whole lot easier when things are very critical. So I would just add that aspect of it.
That's a great point, and that's definitely something that we focus on here at Fuqua, so it's a good reminder to all of us to grow those skill sets. I wanted to jump into some specific questions I had. Chidi, for you, you spoke about Facebook, quickly changing their practices to address racial issues, social issues that are happening right now. And so I'm curious, what are some of the specific things that you see Facebook doing around D&I right now?
That's a really good question. So the first thing I would say is we've always been pretty active in the D&I space. We move really fast as an organization. So some of the things that we've tried have worked, other things haven't worked, and we try to pivot really quick. I think right now what's really popular is we have a program called Elevate, which is essentially almost like a one-day business school workshop where we try to teach small and medium-sized businesses, mostly people who are either from diverse backgrounds or women, just how to grow their business on our platform, right? And even off of our platform. So that's really big. Another big thing is hiring. Kind of going back to your last question too, hiring has completely changed. I think historically, even before the pandemic, a lot of people viewed Facebook or some of the other FANGs as companies that are dominated by engineers. And although for a long time that was probably true, in my around 5 years at Facebook, things have changed a lot, and we're starting to ramp up hiring around strategy, monetization, people who actually understand how to communicate certain products, people who can actually connect with customers, and I think that bodes well for anybody at Fuqua, right? This is big because you won't necessarily see that looking at the job site, but it's something that we're actively trying to get better at, and it's something that I think we will get better at, considering the number of Fuquans now at Facebook in comparison to maybe 3 years ago. It's probably like fivefold.
That's awesome to hear. I hadn't heard of that program. That sounds amazing. Travers, I wanted to ask you about, specific to the wireless space, what are some of the trends that you're seeing, and how is Cisco responding and your team responding to those?
Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. So one of my focuses has primarily been on Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E. So that's the new spectrum of broadband that will be available in the near future. And in terms of why we're really excited and I would say bullish on Wi-Fi 6 is that, it offers more reliable Wi-Fi, increased network capacity, and it boosts speed and your bandwidth, and actually enables improved IoT protocols. So when you're thinking about the number of IoT devices that can be deployed in a space with everything from phones, but Bluetooth enabled devices to and sensors, that'll be really important in terms of the way that we're thinking about our wireless technology. So my first product has primarily been focused on developing low-end APs in the Wi-Fi 6 space. So those will come to market in the next year or so. But we're also really excited about Wi-Fi 6E. So traditionally there's been two bands of bandwidth, so 2.4 and 5. And so the FCC made available a new band called 6G. And so we're really excited about that, just because it's going to provide a whole another bandwidth for these devices to roam on. And so we're looking at different ways that it can really play into augmented reality and help deploy, I would say, like higher broadband applications to bring to market some of these solutions.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kevin, I wanted to ask you a little further. You had mentioned growth in the as a service marketplace and how that's the most important disruption that you're focused on. Could you talk a little bit about how IBM is transforming itself to win in that space?
Yeah, happy to, Helen. And I think really it's reconsidering our business model, our distribution model around the products. I think one of the first ones I remember was when Watson first came out, right? I mean, it was on Jeopardy, won Jeopardy, and everyone said, well, when can I buy one? How do I get a Watson, right? And then is every customer and client going to own their own Watson? And really even the decision at that point was, no, you can't buy Watson. It's not licensed software on a CD or downloadable from website. It's going to be as a service, right? And so today, whether you're, with your healthcare company trying to cure cancer, or you're doing your fantasy football draft with ESPN, it's powered by Watson, right? It's a capability as a service that we're delivering, but it's not software sold. So it's changed the software model route to market. Similarly, from an infrastructure hardware standpoint, right? I mean, IBM very much in the days of building PCs and building servers and storage, but now the focus is cloud, right? Every cloud, it's the applications they're running that give the benefits, whether it's Facebook or others, but underneath it, it is an infrastructure, right? It is the same Cisco, Dell, IBM, other technologies underneath, but now how you bring that to customers is in an as a service model. So we're focused now, not just building the technology, but having AI as a service in Watson, having infrastructure as a platform with IBM Cloud. In my own IBM Services division, partnering with those, or even partnering with the other companies on here to go to customers and say, hey, yes, you love those Dell Thing clients. I can do that as a digital workplace service, right? Where you don't have to buy them, own them, maintain them, but I can bring a service in and set up 100 users and take them away, or expand and grow and do things in a OpEx model, changing the financial construct, do stuff without purchasing long-term commitments, and really kind of embrace that whole transition to an as-a-service model.
Thank you. Sarah, I wanted to ask you a question about innovation. So a lot of us are in a class right now called Managing Innovation in a Global Organization. And so we're familiarizing ourselves with the challenges of innovating. And so I'm curious for you, how does innovation start at Dell, and how do you end up with innovative products?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It's what I've spent the past probably 5 years of my career at Dell focusing on. So hopefully some of my insights are meaningful to you. One thing I will say first, though, is that innovation doesn't only show up in products, right? So that's where my focus happens to be, and that's where the majority of my insights are going to come from. But innovation can influence processes. It can influence routes to market, like Kevin was talking about. So innovation can exist all throughout an organization, and it really should exist all throughout an organization. Excuse me. But when we talk about driving innovation into our products, it's really important to start with the end in mind. We have found a lot of clarity with the design thinking process. So if you're familiar with IDEO and the whole design thinking spectrum that they use, we follow that fairly closely. There's all sorts of think pieces out there on how they got it wrong or how it could be improved, and I'm not here to debate any of that. I'm just here to sort of vouch for the approach that they take in that process, at least in terms of developing a deep empathy of your user's experience or your stakeholders' experience. And it's important to identify the various stakeholders that do play a key role in your product's decisions or usage. And it may be a broad variety of people that weren't previously considered. So for example, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, we were focused mostly on conversations with IT administrators or IT decision makers. They were the ones responsible for deciding which products they would give to their end users. And the end users didn't have much power at the time. As market dynamics shifted and more power shifted to the employees, HR and IT both realized that the types of technology they were providing to their employees influenced whether or not they could attract the right employees and retain the right employees. And so the power shifted. And so it was through that process that we realized that we needed to broaden our scope of who was considered to be a stakeholder. And that's where we really focused on the end user and have spent quite a bit of resources developing that deep empathy of what the end user's experience is, both desired and the reality of their experience, and then correlating that with the needs of the IT administrators, and then procurement. And those are our more traditional customer sets that we've always had really good relationships with. And now we're adding this dynamic of the end users, or have been over the past 4 to 5 years or so. That whole process is hugely informative to end up at a device that encapsulates the right innovation or the right decisions that you make for a product that delivers the experience that stakeholder may want. So without knowing about that stakeholder, it's really difficult to drive the innovation into the portfolio that will be meaningful to them.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. And I actually want to extend a similar question to the rest of you, and specifically about, given that the speed at which innovation is happening right now is a very short timeline with this new work from home reality. And in the class that I mentioned about innovation, we You know, we look at both having an innovative idea, but then also executing and executing quickly enough. I'd love to hear from other panelists about how you manage that process of innovation within your teams. Kevin, you're off mute.
Sure, I'll start.
Great.
Yeah, well, so I mean, some of this was touched on a little bit. I mean, so Sarah obviously touched on, you know, design thinking, right? And that's a huge aspect. Bryce also mentioned this earlier about, you know, being agile and failing fast, right? And those are two very core principles. I mean, I think we're seeing in the industry, you know, we're getting more direct customer feedback through social media and other forums than we ever have before. The ability now, we talk about, you know, in offering management, you know, don't build the wedding cake, right? Build the cupcake. Get something out to market, test it, get sponsored users, you know, client customers, particularly in a B2B fashion where, you know, so is there a customer or two you can sign up and co-develop this with, right? Have them as a sponsored user from the beginning, not build it and then see that they'll buy it, right? But really test that market, fail fast. As Bryce talked about before, is, you know, learn from that, right? Maybe you do one thing and it evolves into something else over time, right? But that's really fostering that innovation and really just the ability to go out and try things, test things, you know, explore ideas, and be willing. I think the biggest thing, be willing to fail, right? Be willing that, you know, don't get so tied to your idea that you take it to the grave with you, but try different things, accept that you may be wrong, and you can learn from it, move on, and improve. I think is key.
Judy, did you want to speak to the same question?
Yeah, I'll just add something to what Kevin just said. So I think one thing that's important for us when we think about innovation, because we like to pride ourselves on being innovative, is making sure that we're not leaving anybody behind, right? Especially on the client and business side, whether that's our customers or the customers of our customers. The one thing that makes it a lot easier for us to be able to do that is some of the relationships that we have with our clients. Some of those relationships, you know, have been built and developed over the last several years. There's a lot of customers that are just completely dependent on our platform. So there's a lot of responsibility there. And I think another thing, when I say leave people behind, that can even be based on geography, right? Facebook is a very US-centric company, but we have a lot of global exposure naturally. So we have to do a better job as a company. And I imagine this is going to hold true for a lot of the other Silicon Valley companies, to make sure that our global workforce is representative of the people that actually use our platform.
Yeah, I want to ask you a quick follow-up question, but I also want to remind people they can enter their own questions in the Q&A. We have 6 more minutes of this panel, so we can get to a few. But I wanted to ask you, you talked about your customers. I wanted to ask how, with working with small businesses that are using your platform, you know, how are you supporting them in changing their practices to this new environment that we're dealing with? They may not have the funding and the capital to make the R&D kind of investments that Facebook's able to make, but how do you support them in that?
So one thing that small businesses tend to do really well is actually communicating with their customers. A lot of these like larger big box retailers or e-commerce businesses, yes, they have really deep wallets, huge balance sheet, but that connection point is not always there. And that's something that we've been trying to emphasize for our small businesses. Continue to speak the language of your customers. You're in the community, you arguably know them better. Use those connections to your benefit, right? Be innovative with them. And that's something that has worked really well, and that's how they're able to compete with some of the larger, you know, businesses and brands out there.
That's awesome, thank you. Okay, so maybe for Travers, you may be the most recent MBA. If you were getting it now, what would you be doing to prepare for your role and/or sector? You have a lot of first years joining us on this, so this is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is, I think, a really great question just in terms of, you know, preparing for interviews and trying to think through what you want your career to look like post business school or even for your internships. You know, so my advice would be to, you know, find something that you're really passionate about. And that for me it's smart cities. And so I'm really passionate about how technology can be integrated with the built environment. And that was really drove me to Cisco. We're one of the largest providers of like smart city technology. So I would encourage people to identify what those passions are, because it becomes that much more easier and seamless to to want to work in that space. And so once you've identified what that passion is, just attending webinars, talking to people and thought leaders that are active in this space, reading blogs, reading books, and trying to get as smart as you can about these industries. Because when you're thinking through where you might be interning for the summer or going for full time, these are a lot of the questions that are going to come up. I think that one of the questions that I saw frequently throughout the interview process at not only Cisco but other tech companies and even consultancies was, what are you reading? And I think that question was really important, because it shows an interest and it shows a level of understanding about the sector that that you're really interested in. So I think that if you can get as smart as you can about that area, then you'll be a lot more dangerous as you're going into the interview process. And I think that you'll be a better product manager, consultant, strategist, and so forth.
That's great advice. I had a question about design thinking. So I wanted to put that to Sarah, since you spoke to that from Acreedy. I'm interested to know how big tech companies include the design thinking process. Is it feature specific or product specific, given that you're part of a large organization?
Yeah, so design thinking can be used in a bunch of different areas of an organization. It doesn't have to be focused on specifically for products. It can be for solutions. It can be for work streams, et cetera. Most of my experience is within the product realm. And we don't actually focus on products first. We focus on the intended experience. So the product mapping it comes almost at the end of the cycle. So we really invest a lot in research to develop that, understanding the day in the life of the target customer and that type of thing. And the way that we populate those studies is through close coordination with our product teams. And those product teams have a clear point of view of who the products are intended for. And then we come in and say, okay, if this is your target market, here's all their pain points, here's the things that they care about, et cetera. And then we go through a robust ideation and incubation process of different experiences that we think that those target customers or target users will respond to. That process includes resonance testing, feedback on whether or not somebody would be willing to pay for something. And then at almost the end, that's where we figure out, okay, which products is actually aligned to based on the feedback that we got from those intended users. And it often changes from where we thought it would align on the front end. And in many cases, because of the shift to as a service, we're really focusing on the types of experiences that will sort of elevate the entire experience across the Dell brand versus any given product. And so I think, the value that we offer through the design thinking process is, where are the things that we can scale across the whole portfolio that creates true differentiation between Dell versus some of the other folks that operate in our space. And that's what's really valuable about that whole process. Hopefully that helps.
That definitely helps. Thank you. Quick plug for our Design and Innovation Club here at Fuqua. It does a lot of design thinking practice. So if it's definitely a skill that's needed in tech. So I'd encourage you to join their Fuqua Connect membership. Okay, so one more rapid fire question for each of you. Given that technology is ever evolving, which skill set, according to you, is most relevant for MBAs contributing to this space right now? Sarah, if you want to start.
So I was having an internal debate between curiosity and relationships. So I think the the skill set around each of the particular jobs, for the most part, it can be learned, right? There's some technical acumen that's necessary. But I still think that curiosity and relationship building will take you really far.
GD?
I'm gonna go with just because Sarah took mine. I'm gonna go with communication and presentation. I think that's gonna be really important, especially in the VC environment. And then Travis brought up a really good point earlier about like the importance of going towards your passion. I think one thing as well for first years is understand that things move so fast. I think Kevin mentioned this earlier too. Like I have classmates now that I'm 8 to 10 years out in terms of like who I communicate with from an alumni perspective. They're on their 5th job, 6th job. Like people move around all the time from company to company or even within a given organization. So it's just to keep an open mind and understand that innovation oftentimes means that things change and you have to get used to change.
Absolutely, thank you. Travers?
Yeah, I think building off Sarah's point of curiosity, it's really important. One thing that I found at Cisco and in other roles is just not being afraid to ask questions. I think that being relatively new to the team, you might think that everyone knows the answer, that the engineers on one team are talking to the engineers on another team. But one thing that I've quickly found is that if I have a question, then someone else probably has that question as well. So being able to, make those connections between people, so build those relationships again, is something that's really important. And I think that it's something that's relatively easy to do, but you just have to be able to do it. And I think that is something that's really valued. And I think that it's something that an intern or a first-year PM can really provide.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a little courage, but it is easy to do. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to the others. I would say critical thinking. I mean, to me, learning from your MBA is still enough that you can have a discussion with the finance team. You can have the discussion with an operations team, a marketing team, understand what they're doing and say, well, have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? And I think the biggest thing, and maybe to summarize from everyone, I think you're hearing it's all the soft skills. I think a lot of people come to technology and it's great to have, as Travers mentioned, have passion, but don't be intimidated by technology. You'll be surrounded by PhDs and others who know AI or whatever deeply. Don't go in an interview trying to, hey, I read AI last night, so I'm going to talk about technology than my interviewer. But can you come in, learn critical thinking, have that, background and really formulate, hey, where does this need to go, right? And is it doing the right thing the customers need? All of those kind of problem statements in a technology world versus, hey, it's about the technology.
That was a great wrap up. Thank you so much again for being here today. We really appreciate your insights. This has been amazing. We're now going to have a little break. We're going to shorten it, but John will tell you what time we're coming back.